Ambassador Kim's footsteps echoed through the empty corridor as she left the council chamber. Her face remained calm, but inside she felt a storm of emotions. The verdict still rang in her ears. Humanity was to be cut off from the rest of the galaxy. Behind her, the massive doors sealed with a resonant thud. She could still picture the council members. The six-limbed Torah with their shimmering scales, the gaseous Mev contained in their environmental suits, and the ancient Dole whose crystalline bodies sparkled under the chamber lights. They had voted as one against humanity. Ambassador Kim, a voice called. She turned to see Grev, her Torah assistant, hurrying toward her. His scales had turned a pale blue, showing his distress. The decision was unfair, Grev said, his voice low. The council didn't even consider your final proposal. Kim nodded. They made up their minds long ago. This vote was just for show. 50 years ago, humans had been welcomed into the galactic community with cautious optimism. Earth had just developed faster than light travel, qualifying them for first contact under council law. Initially, things went well. Humans brought new ideas, creative solutions to old problems, and a fresh perspective. But that creativity soon became labeled as unpredictability. Human adaptability was reframed as aggression. When a human mining colony defended itself against raiders from the Outer Rim, using modified farming equipment as weapons, the Council used it as evidence that humans were dangerously resourceful. Now, after years of growing tensions, the final judgment had been passed. Earth and its colonies would be contained within the solar system by a blockade at the edge of their home system. Kim entered her temporary quarters at the diplomatic wing. The room still held the personal touches she had added during her 5-year posting. A small bonsai tree, a digital frame cycling through images of Earth's landscapes, a shelf of actual paper books she had brought as gifts for curious aliens. She would need to pack it all now. All human diplomats were being sent home. Ambassador, her AI assistant spoke from her wrist device. You have a secure call from Earth Central. Kim sat at her desk and activated the privacy field. The holographic display lit up, showing Admiral Choi, the head of Earth's Space Defense Force. I assume the vote went as expected, Choi said, her expression grim. Yes. The blockade begins in 30 days. All humans outside the solar system have 60 days to return home. Choi nodded. And the firebreak protocol. Kim took a deep breath. This was the moment that would change everything. 50 years of preparation had led to this contingency. Earth had never fully trusted the Council, always keeping certain technological advances secret, building hidden shipyards in the outer solar system, and developing weapons that combined alien technology with human ingenuity. Authorized, Kim replied. The Council has made their choice. Understood. We'll begin immediately. The first phase will take approximately 3 years to complete. We're calling all our deep cover operatives home. Kim looked out her window at the gleaming Council city on the neutral planet Concordia. The beautiful towers and gardens would soon be off limits to humans. The Council thinks they know us, she said quietly. They've studied our history, our wars, our literature. They believe they understand human nature. But they don't, Choi replied. No, they see our capacity for violence but miss our capacity for unity. They see our competitive nature but miss our collaborative strength. Most importantly, they underestimate how quickly we can adapt. After ending the call, Kim began packing her belongings. Her fingers lingered on a gift from the Mev ambassador. A cloud sculpture contained in a special field. Once, she had thought it represented friendship. Now she understood it was merely a diplomatic gesture. A soft chime announced another visitor. Dr. Park entered, his medical uniform marking him as part of the Earth delegation's support staff. What few knew was that Park was also Earth's chief intelligence officer on Concordia. Is it true? He asked without preamble. Yes. Firebreak is active. Park sat heavily in a chair. I spent 10 years here, he said. Made what I thought were friends. Learned their ways. For what? so they could exile us at the first sign of trouble. Not exile, Kim corrected. Quarantine. They think they're containing a disease. Later that evening, Kim attended the final formal dinner with the council representatives. Protocol demanded this parting ceremony, though the atmosphere was tense. The Dole elder approached her, crystal body humming with the frequencies that served as their speech. Kim's translator converted it to words. Ambassador Kim, I hope you understand the council's decision is not made out of malice. Your species has great potential, but needs more time to evolve beyond its aggressive tendencies. Kim smiled politely. And how long did it take your species to evolve, Elder? 10 million years. 20? Humans have gone from stone tools to space travel in less than 10,000. Perhaps what you fear is not our aggression, but our rate of change. The Elder's crystals flickered with uncomfortable harmonics. Rapid change leads to instability. Or adaptation, Kim countered. When the Arcturus probes appeared at the edge of known space last year, who proposed the most effective defense strategy? Humans. When the Rim colony suffered crop failures, whose genetic engineers developed resistant strains within months? Humans. Your accomplishments are not in question, the Elder replied. But your methods concern us. Your species' history is filled with violence. And cooperation. We've learned from our mistakes. The Council's decision is final, the Elder said, ending the conversation. As the dinner concluded, Kim returned to her quarters for the last time. Tomorrow she would board the final diplomatic shuttle back to Earth. The Council believed they had solved the human problem, tucking Earth away safely where it couldn't disturb the careful balance of galactic politics. She accessed her secure terminal and sent the second coded message of the day. Phase 1 confirmed. Ascension timeline approved. The Council thought they were containing humanity. In reality, they had merely given Earth the privacy it needed to prepare. The Firebreak Protocol wasn't just a defensive measure. It was the beginning of humanity's true emergence as a galactic power. Far beyond Neptune, in shipyards hidden within dwarf planets and hollowed-out asteroids, Earth's secret fleet was already taking shape. When humanity finally emerged from its quarantine, the galaxy would face not the primitive species they had dismissed, but a unified force that had used its isolation to grow stronger than anyone could imagine. Kim looked once more at the glittering council city outside her window. We'll be back, she whispered. And next time, you'll listen. General Park stood at the viewport of Neptune Station Alpha, watching as the massive hull of the battleship Defender took shape in the construction bay. The ship's sleek design bore little resemblance to conventional council vessels, where council ships emphasized symmetry and visible weaponry. Human vessels hid their true capabilities beneath smooth surfaces. 15 years, Park murmured to himself. 15 years of silence and patience. The day after the Council's quarantine began, Earth had made a show of diplomatic protest. They had sent messages of outrage, then pleas for reconsideration, and finally, apparent acceptance. All carefully orchestrated to match what the Council expected, a primitive species moving through the stages of grief. Meanwhile, beneath the ice of Europa, within the clouds of Venus, and in the shadows of the outer planets, humanity worked. The quarantine that was meant to contain them had instead given them privacy. General, the command staff is assembled, said Captain Lee, Park's aide. Park nodded and turned from the viewport. At 62, his hair had gone completely gray during the years of preparation. The responsibility of leading humanity's secret defense initiative had left its mark on him, but his posture remained straight, his eyes clear and determined. The command center was built deep within a hollowed-out moon of Neptune. Council monitoring stations couldn't penetrate the carefully designed shields that mimicked natural radiation patterns. Inside, 30 of Earth's top military officials sat around a circular table. The Titan shipyards report the last cruiser squadron is complete, Admiral Han announced as Park entered. Our fleet now stands at 47 capital ships and 126 support vessels. Park took his place at the head of the table. And the special modifications. All vessels have been equipped with the dimensional shift drives, replied Dr. Song, head of the reverse engineering division. She was young for her position, barely 40, but her genius had been crucial to humanity's secret preparations. In simulations, they performed 300% beyond Council standard drives. We've solved the radiation signature problem that would have given us away. Park nodded, pleased. Before the quarantine, human spies had managed to acquire significant alien technology. During the isolation years, human scientists had not only replicated these technologies, but improved upon them in ways the Council races would find shocking. The Council believes we've accepted our fate, Park said to the assembled officers. Their monitoring stations report only what we want them to see: outdated radio transmissions, occasional probe launches that never approach their blockade. Meanwhile, we've built a fleet that could challenge any two Council races combined. Captain Jin, head of intelligence, activated a holographic display showing the positions of Council monitoring stations around the solar system. Our latest intel suggests the Council has actually reduced the number of ships maintaining the blockade. They'd grown complacent. Complacency is a weapon we can use, Park replied. But remember, our goal is not war. If possible, we want to rejoin galactic society on equal terms. Admiral Hand frowned. After what they did to us, they exiled our entire species without just cause. They acted out of fear, Park said calmly. Fear of what humanity might become. Our job is to show them that their fear was misplaced, that humans can be valuable allies. But we negotiate from a position of strength, not weakness. The meeting continued with reports from various divisions. The asteroid mining operations that had expanded exponentially during the isolation years. The fusion technology that now provided nearly unlimited energy. The medical advances that had extended human lifespans by decades. After the formal briefing concluded, Park met privately with Dr. Song in his office. The Council completely underestimated human adaptability, Song said, examining the schematics for their newest ship class. They thought isolation would limit our growth. Instead, it focused our efforts. Park nodded. Human history is filled with examples of necessity driving innovation. The Council races evolved over millions of years. Their technological progress was gradual, methodical. They cannot comprehend how quickly humans can change and adapt. Do you think they'll accept us when they see what we've become? Song asked. Some will fear us more, Park admitted. Others will recognize our potential as allies, but all will respect us. He paused, looking at a photo on his desk. His family back on Earth. My granddaughter turns 5 next month. I want her to grow up in a galaxy where humans are treated as equals, not quarantined like a disease. Later that day, Park visited the training facility where combat pilots practiced in advanced simulators. These weren't conventional pilots. They were neurally linked to their vessels, their reaction times enhanced by carefully calibrated interfaces that the Council would consider dangerously experimental. Captain Kim, the flight instructor, greeted him with a salute. The new squadron is ready for demonstration, sir. Park watched as 12 pilots executed maneuvers that would be impossible for Council vessels. Their simulated ships moved in perfect coordination, using tactics that took advantage of human unpredictability, the very trait the Council had feared. Impressive, Park said. When do they move to actual ships? Next week. We've prepared a training area in the Kuiper Belt, well away from any Council monitoring. That evening, Park returned to his quarters. Unlike the opulent chambers of Council generals, his living space was simple, functional. On the wall hung a framed copy of the Council's quarantine order, a reminder of why they worked so hard. As Park prepared for sleep, his communication panel lit up. It was an encrypted message from Earth Central Command. The Arcturus probes have returned, the message read. Multiple signatures detected at the edge of monitored space. Council forces appear unaware or unresponsive. Recommend accelerating firebreak final phase. Park read the message twice. The Arcturus probes, first detected 16 years ago, had been one of the reasons humanity had pushed for more aggressive defense policies before the quarantine. The Council had dismissed human concerns as paranoia. Now it seemed the probes had returned, possibly as precursors to something more dangerous. And the Council, in their complacency, hadn't noticed. Park sent his response. Acceleration approved. Move to final preparation stage. He then walked back to the viewport, looking out at the Defender as workers attached the final armor plates to its hull. Soon, the ship would join the rest of the fleet, hidden throughout the solar system, ready to emerge when needed. We did not wish for war, Park said softly, echoing the words he had spoken to his officers earlier. But we will not remain caged, and we will not stand by while the galaxy faces a threat it isn't prepared for. The quarantine that was meant to contain humanity had instead given them the opportunity to become something new, something stronger than the Council could imagine. Whether this new humanity would emerge as saviors or conquerors remained to be seen. But emerge they would, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Council Elder's crystalline body dimmed with despair as the latest battle reports scrolled across the emergency bunker's main screen. 3 more Council worlds had fallen to the Arcturus Collective in just the past week. The once mighty Galactic Council, which had ruled for thousands of years, now huddled in a reinforced facility beneath the surface of Proxima Centauri. The Vega defense line has collapsed, announced Admiral Toole, his scaled skin pale with exhaustion. Arcturus processing ships have begun stripping the outer planets. Elder Ziv's crystals vibrated with a low, mournful tone. How many civilians evacuated? Less than 30%, Tull replied. The rest. He didn't need to finish. Everyone knew what happened to those captured by the Arcturus Collective. The machine civilization didn't kill organic life. They repurposed it, harvesting biological material for their biomechanical constructs. The Council Chamber, once a grand hall filled with representatives from 100 worlds, now held only 12 survivors. The Arcturus assault had begun just 3 months ago, but already half the galaxy lay under machine control. We should have heeded the human warnings, said Representative Moore, one of the few who had voted against the quarantine 15 years earlier. They detected the first Arcturus probes and predicted this invasion. The humans were quarantined for good reason, snapped High Marshal Dex. Their unpredictability and aggression made them a threat to galactic stability. And where is your precious stability now? Moore countered, gesturing at the tactical display, showing Arcturus ships spreading across Council space like a virus. Before the argument could escalate, a junior communications officer burst into the chamber. The young Tora female's scales flashed bright purple with excitement. Elders, we've received reports from Ta City. Unknown vessels have engaged the Arcturus fleet there. Admiral Toll rushed to the communication station. Show me. The main screen switched to a tactical feed from Ta City, a star system that had fallen to Arcturus forces just days before. The display showed a confusing jumble of ship movements, the organized grid patterns of Arcturus vessels thrown into disarray by smaller, faster ships that moved in unpredictable patterns. Magnify Sector 4, ordered Toole. The image zoomed in on one of the unknown vessels. Its sleek hull bore no council markings. Instead, a simple emblem was visible. Earth's blue and white globe surrounded by stars. Humans, whispered Elder Ziv. But how? The quarantine apparently wasn't as effective as we thought, finished Moore with something like satisfaction in her voice. The council watched in stunned silence as the battle unfolded. The human ships moved like nothing they had ever seen, executing maneuvers that should have torn them apart. Where Arcturus vessels followed rigid, algorithmic patterns, the human fleet seemed almost chaotic, yet with an underlying coordination that confused the machine intelligence. Their ships are impossibly advanced, Tull said, studying the readings. Energy signatures suggest technology far beyond what humans possessed when we quarantined them. On screen, A human vessel approximately one-third the size of an Arcturus destroyer closed distance and unleashed weapons that cut through the machine ship's defenses like they weren't there. Those weapons, Elder Ziv's crystals, pulsed with confusion. They appear to be modified Council technology, but with efficiency levels we've never achieved. The communications officer's scales flashed again. We're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. A human female's face appeared on screen. She wore a simple gray uniform with minimal rank insignia, a single silver star on each shoulder. This is Admiral Joe of the Terran Defense Fleet. We have contained the Arcturus advance at Tau Ceti and are preparing to push toward Epsilon Indi. Any Council forces in the vicinity should transmit their coordinates for coordination. Elder Ziv moved forward. This is Elder Ziv of the Council Emergency Authority. How did you break the quarantine? How did you build such a fleet in isolation? Admiral Joe's expression remained neutral. The quarantine served its purpose, Elder. It gave humanity time and privacy to prepare for threats you refuse to acknowledge. We monitored the Arcturus probes 15 years ago and predicted this invasion. You dismissed our warnings then, but we continued our preparations regardless. You deliberately violated Council law, accused High Marshal Dex. With a few quick hand gestures, she adjusted the tactical display, highlighting a cluster of ships that had been hiding in the debris field of a destroyed moon. These vessels, smaller and faster than the main battle cruisers, suddenly activated their engines and streaked toward the regrouping Arcturus ships. Strike team reporting successful penetration of command ship defenses, Min announced, unable to hide the excitement in his voice. Boarding parties away. This was the true innovation that gave humans their edge. While the Council races had fought the Arcturus machines with conventional space warfare, humans had developed specialized teams that could board and hack Arcturus vessels. Years of studying recovered Arcturus probe fragments had given Earth scientists insight into the machine civilization's command protocols. Lee turned to her communications officer. Open a channel to the Council bunker. The face of Elder Ziv appeared on screen, the crystalline being's facets glowing with a mix of hope and disbelief. This is Admiral Lee of the Terran Defense Fleet. We've contained the Arcturus advance at Tau Ceti and will begin pushing toward their staging area near Epsilon Indi. We request coordinates of remaining Council forces to coordinate our response. The Elder's crystals pulsed rapidly, a sign of intense emotion among their kind. Admiral, your intervention is unexpected. The quarantine can be discussed later, Lee interrupted firmly. Right now, we need to coordinate our forces if we're going to push the Arcturus collective back. After a brief pause, Elder Ziv nodded. Of course, we are transmitting data on all remaining Council forces now. As the transmission ended, Lee turned back to the battle display. The boarding parties had succeeded. The Arcturus command ship was now broadcasting conflicting orders to its fleet, causing even more confusion among the machine vessels. All ships, execute Phase 3, Lee ordered. No mercy for the machines, but I want any biological components recovered intact. Every piece of Arcturus tech we capture helps us understand their weaknesses. The human fleet moved with precision, encircling the remaining Arcturus ships and methodically disabling them. Unlike the rigid formations favored by Council forces, human vessels constantly shifted positions, never presenting the same pattern twice. This unpredictability confounded the Arcturus algorithms, which relied on pattern recognition to predict enemy movements. Admiral, called Captain Min, we're receiving a transmission from the Arcturus command ship. Lee raised an eyebrow. This was unexpected. In previous encounters, the Arcturus collective had never attempted communication. Put it through, but maintain all security protocols. The main screen flickered, showing not an alien face but a stream of data, the machine equivalent of language. The ship's AI translated. CEAC hostilities. UREANONAMALOUS. Your patty urines DEFYPREDICTION. We will end. Lee exchanged glances with her senior officers. They want to talk. That's new. Could be a trick, warned her security chief. A way to gather data on our decision-making processes. Lee considered this, or they're genuinely confused by us. The council races all follow predictable patterns based on their evolutionary history. Humans don't. She turned back to the screen. Inform the Arcturus entity that we will discuss terms only after their complete withdrawal from all council worlds and the return of all harvested biological material. The response came quickly. Impossible. Biological components already anti-GRATD. Then this conversation is over, Lee replied. All ships resume attack pattern Delta. The human fleet surged forward once more, and the brief moment of communication ended. The Arcturus vessels, seemingly confused by the failed negotiation attempt, responded less effectively than before. Hours later, the battle was over. The Ta Ceti system had been liberated, the first major victory against the Arcturus Collective since their invasion began. In her private quarters, Admiral Lee reviewed the after-action reports. The human fleet had performed beyond expectations, but they had also taken losses. 17 ships damaged, 5 destroyed, 342 crew members dead, 800 wounded. A soft chime announced a visitor. Dr. June entered, carrying medical reports. With a few quick hand gestures, she adjusted the tactical display, highlighting a cluster of ships that had been hiding in the debris field of a destroyed moon. These vessels, smaller and faster than the main battle cruisers, suddenly activated their engines and streaked toward the regrouping Arcturus ships. Strike team reporting successful penetration of command ship defenses. Min announced, unable to hide the excitement in his voice. Boarding parties away. This was the true innovation that gave humans their edge. While the council races had fought the Arcturus machines with conventional space warfare, humans had developed specialized teams that could board and hack Arcturus vessels. Years of studying recovered Arcturus probe fragments had given Earth scientists insight into the machine civilization's command protocols. Lee turned to her communications officer. Open a channel to the council bunker. The face of Elder Ziv appeared on screen, the crystalline being's facets glowing with a mix of hope and disbelief. This is Admiral Lee of the Terran Defense Fleet. We've contained the Arcturus advance at Ta Ceti and will begin pushing toward their staging area near Epsilon Indi. We request coordinates of remaining council forces to coordinate our response. The Elder's crystals pulsed rapidly, a sign of intense emotion among their kind. Admiral, your intervention is unexpected. The quarantine can be discussed later, Lee interrupted firmly. Right now, we need to coordinate our forces if we're going to push the Arcturus Collective back. After a brief pause, Elder Ziv nodded. Of course, we are transmitting data on all remaining council forces now. As the transmission ended, Lee turned back to the battle display. The boarding parties had succeeded. The Arcturus command ship was now broadcasting conflicting orders to its fleet, causing even more confusion among the machine vessels. All ships, execute Phase 3, Lee ordered. No mercy for the machines, but I want any biological components recovered intact. Every piece of Arcturus tech we capture helps us understand their weaknesses. The human fleet moved with precision, encircling the remaining Arcturus ships and methodically disabling them. Unlike the rigid formations favored by council forces, human vessels constantly shifted positions, never presenting the same pattern twice. This unpredictability confounded the Arcturus algorithms, which relied on pattern recognition to predict enemy movements. Admiral, called Captain Min, we're receiving a transmission from the Arcturus command ship. Lee raised an eyebrow. This was unexpected. In previous encounters, the Arcturus Collective had never attempted communication. Put it through, but maintain all security protocols. The main screen flickered, showing not an alien face but a stream of data, the machine equivalent of language. The ship's AI translated. CEAC hostilities. UREANOMALOUS. Your patty or as DEFYPREDICTION. We will understand. Lee exchanged glances with her senior officers. They want to talk. That's new. Could be a trick, warned her security chief. A way to gather data on our decision-making processes. Lee considered this, or they're genuinely confused by us. The council races all follow predictable patterns based on their evolutionary history. Humans don't. She turned back to the screen. Inform the Arcturus entity that we will discuss terms only after their complete withdrawal from all council worlds and the return of all harvested biological material. The response came quickly. Impossible. Biological components already anti-BUI. TED. Then this conversation is over, Lee replied. All ships resume attack pattern Delta. The human fleet surged forward once more, and the brief moment of communication ended. The Arcturus vessels, seemingly confused by the failed negotiation attempt, responded less effectively than before. Hours later, the battle was over. The Ta City system had been liberated, the first major victory against the Arcturus Collective since their invasion began. In her private quarters, Admiral Lee reviewed the after-action reports. The human fleet had performed beyond expectations, but they had also taken losses. 17 ships damaged, 5 destroyed, 342 crew members dead, 800 wounded. A soft chime announced a visitor. Dr. June entered, carrying medical reports. We've treated the most critical cases, he said, handing her a tablet. But I'm more concerned about what we found on the captured Arcturus ships. Lee scrolled through the images and felt her stomach tighten. The Arcturus vessels contained biological components, living tissue harvested from captured council citizens, integrated into the ship's systems like living circuit boards. They're not just machines, Jun said quietly. They're hybrids. They use organic neural tissue to enhance their processing capabilities. Lee set the tablet down. Does this change our tactical approach? It should. These aren't just mindless drones. They are learning from each encounter. That's why they attempted communication. They're trying to understand how we think, because our patterns don't match anything in their database. Lee nodded slowly. That's our advantage then. We need to keep being unpredictable. She returned to the command deck, where her officers were coordinating with the scattered council forces. The tactical display now showed the entire sector, with Arcturus-controlled systems in red, council-held systems in blue, and contested areas in purple. We've received coordinates from 3 council fleet remnants, reported her communications officer. They're requesting escort to join our forces at the rendezvous point. Send the 7th Squadron to escort them, Lee ordered. And open a channel to Earth Command. They need to see what we've discovered about the Arcturus biology. When the connection was established, General Park's face appeared on screen. The old soldier looked tired but satisfied. Congratulations on your victory, Admiral, he said. The Council is already sending messages of gratitude. Quite a change from their attitude 15 years ago. They're desperate, Lee replied. And we've made some disturbing discoveries about the enemy. She transmitted the data Dr. June had collected. Park studied it, his expression growing grave. This complicates our ethical position. If these ships are partially biological, does that change how we fight them? They're still harvesting living beings against their will, Lee pointed out. Our mission remains the same. Stop the Arcturus advance and free any captives who can be saved. Park nodded. Agreed. But this information might help us develop new strategies. I'm forwarding this to our research teams. He paused. The Council has requested a formal meeting with our diplomatic corps. They want to discuss the new galactic order once this crisis ends. Lee smiled thinly. I imagine they do. After 15 years of quarantine, they suddenly want our help redefining galactic politics. Ambassador Kim is handling the negotiations, Park assured her. She hasn't forgotten the Council's treatment of humanity. After the transmission ended, Lee returned to the tactical display. The victory at Tau Ceti was just the beginning. The Arcturus Collective still controlled vast regions of space, and liberating those areas would require more than just military might. It would require the innovation and adaptability that made humans unique. She watched as her fleet regrouped, repaired damage, and prepared for the next engagement. The Council races had feared human unpredictability, but now that very trait was their salvation. Whatever came after this war, the galaxy would never again underestimate humanity. Set course for Epsilon Indi, Lee ordered. The Arcturus Collective is about to learn another lesson about human determination. The new council chamber gleamed in the light of 3 suns. Unlike the old chamber, destroyed during the Arcturus assault on Concordia, this hall had been built on a new world, one chosen jointly by all spacefaring species. The hall itself reflected the new galactic order, circular rather than hierarchical, with no raised platform for the elder races. Ambassador Kim straightened her formal diplomatic uniform as she prepared to enter. 6 months had passed since the final battle against the Arcturus Collective. 6 months of rebuilding, of healing, and of difficult negotiations. "Are you ready?" asked Admiral Lee, who stood beside her. The Admiral had exchanged her battle uniform for formal dress, though she still wore the medal awarded for her victory at Epsilon Indi. Kim nodded. As ready as anyone can be when rewriting the rules for an entire galaxy. They entered the chamber together. Representatives from over 100 worlds filled the seats, some familiar council races, others newly liberated species who had never before had a voice in galactic governance. All eyes turned to Kim as she walked to the central speaking area. Elder Ziv, one of the few original council members to survive the war, activated the translation field so all could understand. The council recognizes Ambassador Kim of Earth, speaking on behalf of humanity. Kim looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of beings who had once voted to quarantine her entire species. There was no triumph in her gaze, only calm determination. 15 years ago, I stood before the old council as they pronounced sentence on humanity. She began. We were deemed too unpredictable, too aggressive to join galactic society. We were quarantined within our solar system, cut off from the stars we had just begun to explore. A murmur passed through the chamber. Many of the representatives shifted uncomfortably. Today, I return not to demand apology or reparation, but to look forward. Humanity doesn't seek dominance. Kim continued, her voice clear and steady. We seek partnership. Our adaptability, the very trait you feared, proved to be the galaxy's salvation against the Arcturus threat. She activated a holographic display showing the current galactic map. Areas once controlled by the Arcturus Collective now showed as liberated, thanks largely to human military intervention. The old council system failed, Kim said bluntly. It failed because it valued stability over adaptation, tradition over innovation. When faced with an enemy that could predict your every move, you needed something unpredictable. You needed humanity. Representative Moore, one of the few who had opposed the quarantine years ago, spoke up. You have proven your worth, Ambassador. No one here disputes that. The question now is, what form should our new alliance take? Kim nodded. We'd propose a new structure, not a council that rules, but a galactic union that collaborates. No species holds permanent authority. Leadership rotates. All decisions require consensus from diverse perspectives. She gestured to the document that hovered in the center of the room, the new charter that had been negotiated over the past 6 months. This charter establishes equal standing for all spacefaring species that choose to join. It creates mechanisms for resolving disputes that don't rely on the judgment of elder races. Most importantly, it recognizes that diversity of thought is not a weakness, but our greatest strength against future threats. Elder Ziv's crystals pulsed with blue light, a sign of thoughtful consideration. Some will say this gives too much influence to younger species who lack experience in galactic affairs. Kim smiled slightly. Experience is valuable, Elder Ziv. But fresh perspectives are equally important. The Arcturus Collective nearly conquered us all precisely because the old ways were too predictable. After her speech, representatives from each world approached the charter to signify their acceptance. Some did so eagerly, others with clear reluctance. When Elder Ziv pressed crystalline appendages to the document, a subtle tension in the room eased. The oldest council race was embracing the new order. Later, at the reception that followed the ceremony, Kim stood by a viewport overlooking the planet below. Admiral Lee joined her, carrying 2 glasses of a shimmering blue liquid. The Dal say this is their finest celebratory drink, Lee said, offering one to Kim. Supposedly it allows you to taste the emotions of the being who prepared it. Kim accepted the glass. And what emotion does this one convey? Hope, I think. Lee took a small sip, though my translator might be off. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the planets of this new capital system rotate slowly in their dance. Was this what you imagined? Lee asked finally. When you sent that message 15 years ago, Firebreak Protocol authorize. Did you see this outcome? Kim considered the question carefully. I knew we would emerge stronger. I knew we would force the Council to acknowledge us as equals. But no, I never imagined it would happen like this. She gestured to the chamber where representatives of 100 worlds now mingled freely. I never imagined us as saviors. Some humans wanted more, Lee said quietly. After the war, there were voices calling for us to take control, to replace the Council with human leadership. There always are such voices, Kim replied. But that was never our goal. Dominance brings its own problems. Partnership, true partnership, is harder but ultimately stronger. Across the room, Dr. Park was deep in conversation with scientists from 3 different species, all eagerly discussing the technology that had been developed during Earth's years of isolation. Nearby, human diplomats chatted with representatives from worlds that, until recently, had never encountered humans. We still face challenges, Lee noted. The outer regions report some Arcturus activity. They may be regrouping. Then we'll face that threat together, as a union, Kim said firmly. And we'll be stronger for our diversity. Their conversation was interrupted by Elder Ziv, who approached with formal dignity. The Elder's crystals glowed with warm colors that indicated emotional openness. Ambassador Kim, Ziv began, I wish to express something that may not translate perfectly. My species seldom acknowledges error. Our long lives make us resistant to admitting mistakes. Kim waited patiently. The decision to quarantine humanity was the greatest mistake of my 5,000-year life, Ziv continued. Had we instead embraced your species as partners 15 years ago, perhaps the Arcturus invasion would have been prevented entirely. We can't know that, Elder, Kim replied gently. But I appreciate the sentiment. What matters now is that we move forward together. Ziv's crystals pulsed with agreement. The Dal have a saying. The strongest structures are built from diverse materials. I believe this new union may indeed be stronger than anything we built before. As the reception continued, Kim found a moment to step away to a private balcony. Below her stretched the new capital city, built collaboratively by architects from 20 different worlds. Human innovation, Dal crystal technology, Tor environmental systems, all working in harmony. She thought back to that moment 15 years ago, standing alone before the Council as they pronounced humanity's sentence. How different things looked now. The quarantine that was meant to contain humanity had instead given them time to develop, to innovate, to become something new. A gentle chime from her communication device interrupted her thoughts. It was a message from Earth. The first generation of ships built under the new Union Charter was ready for launch. These vessels would carry mixed crews, humans serving alongside the very species that had once feared them. Kim smiled as she looked out at the stars. Humanity had found its place among them, not through conquest, but by proving their worth when it mattered most. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly as it should be.